The day I discovered my mother had drained my college fund, I was sitting in our kitchen, surrounded by acceptance letters from universities I'd never attend. My hands trembled as I stared at the bank statement, the numbers blurring before my eyes. 0. A big fat 0 where my future should have been. My name is Victoria, and at 18 I learned that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. What do you mean it's gone? I gripped the phone tighter, fighting back tears as I spoke with the bank representative. There has to be some mistake. That account had over $40,000 in it last month. I'm sorry, miss, but the account holder, Yesenia Ramos, withdrew the full amount on April 15th. The date hit me like a punch to the gut. April 15th, the day my mother had her emergency plastic surgery. I'd noticed her face looked different when she came home, but she'd brushed it off as just a little self-care. Vicky? My brother Leonel's voice startled me as he walked into the kitchen. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I hung up the phone and pushed the bank statement across the table. Mom took it. All of it. My entire college fund. Leonel picked up the paper, his face darkening as he read. No way. She wouldn't. She did. I stood up, pacing the kitchen. Remember her new face? Guess how much a facelift costs these days? Jesus Christ. He ran his hands through his hair. Have you talked to her? She's at her spa day with her friends. I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. Probably celebrating her new look with my future. Leonel pulled me into a hug and I finally let the tears fall. What am I going to do? UCLA is waiting for my deposit by next week. We'll figure something out, he said. But we both knew there weren't many options. He was barely making ends meet at his new job, and Dad hadn't been in the picture since I was 12. That evening, when Mom finally came home, she breezed through the front door like nothing was wrong. Her face was noticeably tighter, her smile wider, but all I could see was the price tag hanging over her head. Mom, I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. We need to talk about my college fund. She froze for a split second before continuing to arrange her purse on the counter. Oh, honey, I've been meaning to discuss that with you. Sometimes in life, we have to make difficult choices. Difficult choices? I stood up, knocking my chair backward. You stole my future for a facelift. Don't be so dramatic, Victoria. She touched her cheek delicately. This was an investment in our family's image. Besides, community college is a perfectly respectable option. Leonel stepped between us. Mom, that money was for Vicky's education. How could you— I am still your mother, she snapped, her new face flushing red. I don't have to justify my decisions to my children. My phone buzzed, a reminder about the UCLA deposit deadline. The sight of it made me sick. You're right, I said quietly. You don't have to justify anything, and I don't have to forgive you. I walked out of the kitchen, ignoring her calls behind me. In my room, I pulled out my laptop and started researching community colleges. If she thought this would break me, she was wrong. 3 hours later, Leonel knocked on my door. Hey, got a minute? I nodded, and he sat on the edge of my bed. I talked to Uncle Jack, he said. He might be able to help with some loans. No. I turned my laptop around, showing him the application I'd just completed. I'm enrolling in Valley Community College. I'll work part-time, take classes, and figure it out myself. I'm done depending on this family. Vicky! My phone rang, cutting him off. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Victoria? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. This is Margaret from Student Services at Valley Community College. We received your application, and I wanted to discuss our work-study program. We have an immediate opening in our design department that might interest you. I caught Leonel's eye as I listened to Margaret detail the opportunity. He gave me a small smile and squeezed my hand. Yes, I said into the phone, straightening my spine. I'm very interested. After I hung up, Leonel pulled me into another hug. You're going to be okay, you know that? I know. I wiped my eyes, looking at the acceptance letters still scattered across my desk. But she's going to regret this. Maybe not today, maybe not soon, but someday. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Mom. We need to talk about your attitude, young lady. I deleted the message without responding. Some bridges once burned should stay ashes. 8 years can change everything. I stood at the window of my corner office 30 stories above Seattle watching the morning fog roll in from the bay. The scared 18-year-old girl who'd enrolled in community college felt like a stranger now. Earth to Victoria! Louisa's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She leaned against my doorframe, 2 coffee cups in hand. You're doing that brooding thing again. I prefer to call it contemplative reflection, I said, accepting the coffee she offered. Thanks for this. So, she perched on my desk, are you going to tell me what's got you all contemplative at 8 in the morning? I pulled up my email, showing her the message from Roman, our creative director. I got the promotion, head of digital design, effective next month, Louisa squealed, nearly spilling her coffee. Oh my God, this calls for celebrations. Drinks tonight, no excuses. There's more. I clicked to another email. Mom sent me a message yesterday. The smile fell from Louisa's face. She was one of the few people who knew the full story. What does she want? The usual. Money, attention, validation. Apparently, her face isn't holding up as well as the surgeon promised. Delete it, Louisa said firmly. You've worked too hard to let her drag you back into her drama. Before I could respond, Roman appeared in the doorway. Victoria, got a minute? Need your eyes on the Peterson campaign. Speaking of drama, Louisa whispered as she slipped out, winking at me. I followed Roman to the conference room, where he'd spread dozens of mock-ups across the table. These are incredible, I said, examining the designs. Who's the lead on this? You are, starting today. He smiled, watching my reaction. Consider it your first project as head of digital design. Roman, You earned this, he cut me off. 8 years ago, you walked into my previous agency as an intern from community college. Remember what you said in that interview? I laughed. That I'd either be your best hire or your biggest mistake. And you've been proving it was the first option ever since. He gathered the mock-ups into a neat pile. Though I have to ask, are you okay? You seem distracted this morning. I hesitated. Roman had become more than a boss over the years. He was a mentor, sometimes even a father figure. Just family stuff. Nothing I can't handle. Family has a way of complicating things, he said carefully, but don't let old ghosts haunt your future. My phone buzzed. Another text from Lionel. Mum's getting desperate. She's been calling everyone, even tried Uncle Jack. Speaking of ghosts, I muttered. That evening, Louisa dragged me to our favourite bar, insisting we properly celebrate the promotion. The place was packed, but we managed to snag our usual corner booth. To the new head of digital design, Louisa raised her glass, and to telling toxic family members to shove it. You're terrible, I laughed, but clinked glasses anyway. Seriously, though, she said, leaning forward, what are you going to do about your mom? I traced the condensation on my glass. Nothing. She made her choice 8 years ago. She can deal with the consequences. But Lionel says it's bad this time. Something about the surgery rejecting after all these years. He thinks she needs another procedure, but can't afford it. And let me guess. She suddenly remembered she has a successful daughter. My phone lit up with an unknown number. I declined the call, but a voicemail notification appeared seconds later. Play it, Louisa urged. On speaker. I hesitated, then hit play. Victoria, mi hija, my mother's voice filled our corner, smaller somehow than I remembered. I know I don't deserve to ask for your help, but I don't know what else to do. The doctors say, if I don't get this fixed soon, please just call me back. Louisa reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You okay? You know what's funny? I took a long drink. Part of me has been waiting for this moment, waiting for karma to catch up with her. So why don't I feel better? Because you're not her, Louisa said simply. You're better than that. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Uncle Jack. We need to talk about your mother. There's something you should know. I showed the message to Louisa, who raised an eyebrow. Didn't you say he hasn't spoken to your mum in years? Exactly. I finished my drink and stood up, which means whatever this is, it's serious. What are you going to do? I grabbed my jacket, already pulling up Uncle Jack's number. I'm going to find out exactly what kind of karma we're dealing with. As I stepped outside to make the call, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Some debts, it seems, take years to come due. She's dying, Victoria. Uncle Jack's words crackled through my phone, cutting through the night air. The surgery she got, the one with your money, it's killing her. I leaned against the cold brick wall outside the bar, my free hand pressed against my stomach. What do you mean, killing her? The doctor used experimental fillers, cheaper than the standard ones. They're breaking down now, causing infections. Her immune system is shutting down. A group of drunk college students stumbled past, their laughter a stark contrast to the heaviness settling in my chest. Why are you telling me this, Uncle Jack? You haven't spoken to her in, 10 years? She showed up at my door yesterday, looking like something out of a horror movie. Half her face is... It's not good, kid. He sighed heavily. I may hate what she did to you, but she's still my sister. I closed my eyes, remembering the last time I'd seen her. Christmas 5 years ago. She'd been so proud of her eternal youth, bragging about how everyone thought she was Lionel's sister instead of his mother. Victoria? Louisa appeared beside me, concern etched on her face. You've been out here for 20 minutes. I held up one finger, turning back to the phone. How much does she need? 80,000 for the corrective surgeries. Insurance won't cover it since the original procedure was elective. Uncle Jack paused. Look, I know you have every right to tell her to go to hell. I'll think about it, I cut him off. That's all I can promise right now. After hanging up, I told Louisa everything. She listened without interrupting, then pulled me into a fierce hug. Let's get you home, she said. You shouldn't be making any decisions tonight. But sleep proved impossible. At 3 a.m., I called Lionel. I was wondering when you'd call, he answered immediately. You talked to Uncle Jack. Why didn't you tell me how bad it was? Would you have believed me? His voice was tired. You've worked so hard to build your new life, Vicky. I didn't want to be the one to drag you back. I got up, pacing my apartment. Have you seen her? Yesterday. He trailed off. She's scared. Really scared. And for the first time in her life, her looks can't save her. Morning came too quickly. I dragged myself into the office, running on coffee and anxiety. Roman took one look at me and pulled me into his office. Sit, he ordered, closing the door. Talk. I collapsed into his chair. My mother's facing some serious medical issues. Issues caused by a surgery she got with money she stole from me 8 years ago. Ah, he leaned against his desk. And now she needs your help? $80,000 worth of help? I laughed bitterly. The exact amount that would have covered my first 2 years at UCLA. Life has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. Roman studied me for a moment. Want to know what I think? Please. I think you're not actually struggling with whether to help her or not. You're struggling with why you want to help her at all. The truth of his words hit me hard. She doesn't deserve it. Probably not, he agreed. But deserving has nothing to do with it. The question is, what can you live with? My phone buzzed, a text from Uncle Jack with a photo attached. I opened it and immediately wished I hadn't. My mother's face was distorted, one side swollen and discoloured. She looked like a different person. Oh, God, I whispered. Roman glanced at the photo. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't forgiving someone else. It's forgiving yourself for still caring. I should hate her, I said, my voice breaking. After everything she did, I should want her to suffer. But you don't. No, I wiped my eyes. I don't. Take the day, Roman said, squeezing my shoulder. Sort this out. The Peterson campaign can wait. Outside his office, I called Uncle Jack back. Give me her number. Victoria. I'm not promising anything, I said quickly, but I need to hear it from her. All of it. The truth about why she did it, why she's never apologized, everything. And then I watched the office buzz around me, the life I'd built from the ashes of her betrayal. Then I'll decide if karma needs my help or not. As I gathered my things to leave, Louisa appeared with fresh coffee. Where are you going? To face some ghosts, I said, showing her the photo. Want to come be my backup? She linked her arm through mine. Always, but first, We're getting something stronger than coffee. The elevator doors closed and I took a deep breath. 8 years ago, my mother's vanity had stolen my future. Now her vanity was stealing her life. The question was, would I be the bigger person, or would I let karma finish what it started? I sat in my parked car outside the coffee shop, staring at my mother's number on my phone screen. Louisa squeezed my hand. "You don't have to do this," she reminded me. "Yes, I do." I pressed dial before I could change my mind. 3 rings, 4. Then, "Victoria?" My mother's voice was different, muffled like she was speaking through cotton. "Is it really you?" "Hi, Mom." The words felt foreign in my mouth. "We need to talk." "Oh, mi hija, thank God, I've been trying to reach you." "Stop," I cut her off. "Before we go any further, I need you to answer one question. Why did you do it?" Silence stretched between us. In the background, I could hear a TV playing. "I was afraid," she finally said, "of getting old, of becoming invisible. You don't understand what it's like." "You're right, I don't understand." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "I don't understand how you could steal your daughter's future for your face." "I thought," she coughed, a wet, painful sound. "I thought I could pay you back. There was this man, he promised me investment opportunities." "Of course there was." I laughed, but there was no humour in it. "There's always a man, or an opportunity, or an excuse." "Victoria, please." Her voice cracked. "I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm scared. The doctors say the infection is spreading. My immune system." "I saw the photo Uncle Jack sent." I closed my eyes, trying to block out the image. "How much time did they give you?" "Without the surgery? 3 months, maybe less." She started crying, the sound distorted through what I assumed was facial swelling. "I don't want to die like this." Louisa pulled out her tablet, showing me something she'd been researching. Medical articles about experimental fillers, lawsuits, complications. My mother wasn't the only victim. "The money you need," I said, scrolling through the articles. 80,000. That's a specific number." "Yes." She hesitated. "The same amount I took from you." "Finally, she admits it," I muttered. Louder, I asked, "Have you looked into payment plans? Medical loans?" "My credit is—" She trailed off. "After the investment scam, I had to declare bankruptcy. No one will lend to me." I thought about my savings account, the money I'd scraped together over 8 years of hard work, the down payment for the house I'd been planning to buy. "Victoria?" she prompted when I didn't respond. "I need time to think," I said, "and I need something else from you." "Anything. I want the truth, all of it. Not just about the money, but about everything. Why you never apologized, why you acted like I was the one who wronged you. All of it." Another pause. "Can we meet, please? These things, they shouldn't be said over the phone." I looked at Louisa, who nodded encouragingly. "Fine. I'll fly down this weekend." "Thank you," she whispered. "Victoria, Don't," I stopped her. "Don't say you're sorry now, not like this. Not because you need something from me." After hanging up, I let my head fall against the steering wheel. Louisa rubbed my back. "You okay?" "No." I sat up, wiping my eyes. "But I will be. Let's get back to the office. I need to talk to Roman about taking some time off." "What are you going to do about the money?" I pulled up my banking app, staring at the numbers. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to let her face the consequences of her actions, but another part doesn't want to become her," Louisa finished. My phone buzzed with a text from Lionel. "Just heard you're coming home. Want me to pick you up from the airport?" "Yes," I typed back. "And Leo, make sure she understands if I help her, it's not forgiveness. It's mercy." "Sometimes they're the same thing," he responded. Back at the office, Roman was waiting. "How'd it go?" "I'm going to need those vacation days we discussed," I said, dropping into a chair, "and possibly a very large advance on my new salary." He studied me for a moment, then opened his desk drawer. "I've been saving this for a special occasion." He pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "Want to tell me what you're thinking?" I accepted the glass he offered. "I'm thinking about karma and choices, and whether becoming the thing you hate is worse than being the thing you fear. Heavy thoughts for 4 in the afternoon. Heavy choices for any time. I took a sip, letting the liquor burn. She took my future once. Now I have the power to take hers. But I don't know if I can live with that choice. I pulled up the flight booking website on my phone. Even if she deserves it. Roman refilled my glass. Sometimes the hardest choices aren't between right and wrong. They're between wrong and less wrong. I booked the flight for Friday morning. 3 days to decide, karma or mercy. The airport coffee shop where I agreed to meet Uncle Jack hadn't changed in 8 years. Neither had he. Same leather jacket, same salt and pepper beard, same disapproving scowl. "You look good, kid," he said, pushing a coffee toward me. "Success suits you." "Thanks." I settled into the chair across from him. "Now tell me what was so urgent it couldn't wait until I got to Mom's." He pulled out his phone, sliding it across the table. "Your mother wasn't the only one who made bad choices about appearances." I looked at the photo on his screen. A much younger version of my mother, maybe 20 years old, standing next to an equally young Uncle Jack. Her face was bruised, her arm in a cast. "What is this?" "The first time your mother tried to fix herself." He took his phone back. "Our father was traditional, believed women should be beautiful, silent, and obedient. Your mother learned early that her looks were her only currency." "That doesn't excuse—" "No, it doesn't," he cut me off. "But it explains. After that accident, she got her first nose job. Then breast implants at 22. By 30, she'd had 3 surgeries. Each time, she swore it would be the last. A waitress stopped by offering refills. I waited until she left before speaking. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you need to understand, this isn't just about vanity. Your mother's been running from her reflection her whole life." He leaned forward. "The doctor who did her last surgery. He preys on women like her. Desperate, damaged. Offers them miracles at discount prices." My phone buzzed. "Lionel. At Mom's. It's worse than the pictures." "Where are you?" "She's still our mother," Uncle Jack said quietly. "Despite everything." "Would you help her?" I asked. "If you had the money." He sat back, running a hand through his beard. "I already offered." She refused. "What? Why?" "Pride, maybe. Or shame. She said she wouldn't take money from anyone but you." "Of course not," I laughed bitterly, "because it has to be me. It has to be the money she stole coming back to save her." "Or maybe," he said carefully, "because you're the only one she thinks deserves to decide her fate." I stood up, grabbing my bag. "I need to see her." "Victoria!" Uncle Jack caught my arm. "Whatever you decide, remember, we become what we do, not what's done to us." Lionel was waiting outside Mom's house when my Uber pulled up. He hugged me tight, whispering, "Brace yourself." The house was darker than I remembered, curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. Family photos still lined the hallway, memories of a time when we were whole, when trust wasn't a currency we traded in. "Vicky," Mom's voice came from the living room. "Is that you?" I stepped through the doorway and froze. The woman on the couch barely resembled my mother. Her face was grotesquely swollen on one side, the skin mottled and stretched. The other side sagged, as if the tissue beneath was dissolving. "Oh, Mom," I whispered. "Don't look at me." She turned away, covering her face with shaking hands. "Please don't look at me." I sat beside her, my anger warring with an overwhelming surge of pity. "The doctor who did this, can he be prosecuted?" "He's already fled the country," Lionel said from the doorway. 3 other women have filed complaints." "Victoria," Mom lowered her hands, her good eye finding mine. "I know I have no right to ask." "Stop." I pulled out my phone, bringing up my banking app. "Before we discuss anything, I need to hear it, all of it. Starting with why you never said sorry." She nodded slowly, painfully. "Because saying sorry meant admitting what I'd done. Not just to you, but to myself. And I couldn't. I couldn't face being that person. The mother who sacrificed her daughter's future for her own vanity. And now? Now?" She gestured to her ruined face. Now I am exactly what I always feared becoming: ugly, worthless, invisible. Mom. No, let me finish. She straightened, wincing with the effort. I destroyed something beautiful, your trust, your love, to create something artificial. And now both are gone. My phone buzzed again, Louisa. Whatever you decide, I support you. But remember who you are. I looked at my mother, really looked at her. Behind the swelling and decay, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. The same fear that had driven her all these years, the fear that had cost me my future, was now eating her alive. $80,000, I said quietly. The exact amount you took. Yes, I stood up, my decision crystallizing. I'll help you, but this time, we're doing it my way. The look of hope that crossed her distorted features made my heart clench. I just prayed I was making the right choice, not just for her, but for the person I wanted to be. These are my conditions, I said, placing the contract on the coffee table between us. First, I'm not giving you the money directly. I'll pay the hospital and doctors myself. Mom nodded, her good eye fixed on the papers. Second, I continued, you'll attend therapy, weekly sessions for at least a year. I've already found someone who specializes in body image issues. Victoria, she started to protest. Non-negotiable. I pushed the contract closer. Third, you'll sign this promissory note. It's not legally binding. We both know you can't pay it back. But it's a reminder. Every month you'll write me a letter. Not about the money, but about your progress, your therapy, your understanding of what happened. Lionel, who'd been quiet until now, picked up the contract. This is thorough. I had Roman's lawyer draw it up this morning. I turned back to Mom. Last condition, you tell the truth. To everyone. About what you did with my college fund, about this sketchy doctor, all of it. Other women need to know. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for the papers. And if I agree to all this, then I'll help you. But understand something. This isn't forgiveness. This is me choosing not to become the kind of person who could watch their mother suffer, even if she deserves it. I understand, she whispered. Do you? I leaned forward. Because I need you to really hear this. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me, for the person I want to be. Tears rolled down her distorted face. I don't deserve you. No, you don't. I handed her a pen. Sign it. As she scrawled her signature, Uncle Jack appeared in the doorway. The hospital called. They can take her tomorrow morning if you can make the deposit today. I pulled out my phone, pulling up my banking app one last time. 8 years of savings, gone in a single transfer. The irony wasn't lost on me. Done, I said, showing Mom the confirmation. The surgery's paid for. She tried to reach for my hand, but I stood up, stepping back. Victoria, please, I need some air. I headed for the door, but Lionel caught up with me on the porch. You're doing the right thing, he said. Am I? I turned to face him. Because right now it feels like I'm rewarding her for being exactly who she's always been. No, he shook his head. You're showing her who you are, who you chose to become despite her, not because of her. My phone rang, Louisa's ringtone. Hey, I answered. Perfect timing. How'd it go? Did you do it? Yeah. I walked down the porch steps, needing distance from the house. The money's gone, surgery's tomorrow. How do you feel? Honestly, like I just got played again. I kicked at a rock on the sidewalk. She's sitting in there crying, acting grateful, but 8 years ago, she didn't shed a single tear when she took my future. Maybe she's changed, Louisa suggested. Or maybe she's just desperate. I watched a car drive past, its headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Either way, I guess I'll find out. The letters she has to write me, they'll tell me everything I need to know. Uncle Jack emerged from the house, lighting a cigarette. Your mother wants to know if you'll come to the hospital tomorrow. I covered the phone. Tell her I'll think about it. Back on the phone, Louisa asked, Will you go? I don't know. I sighed, watching Uncle Jack's cigarette glow in the darkness. Part of me wants to be as absent as she was when I needed her. But then I'd just be playing her game, wouldn't I? You're not her, Louisa reminded me. You never will be. Inside, I could hear Mom crying, her sobs carrying through the open window. 8 years ago, those tears would have broken my heart. Now they just made me tired. I should go, I told Louisa. I need to check into my hotel and call Roman about extending my leave. Victoria, Mom called from inside. Please, don't leave yet. There's so much I need to say. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 8 years of pain, anger, and unspoken words. I'll call you back, I told Louisa. Walking back into the house felt like stepping into the past. But this time, I was the one with the power, the one with the choice. Okay, Mom, I said, sitting down across from her. Talk, but remember, this time, I'm the one who gets to decide if your words are worth anything. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, counting down the moments until tomorrow's surgery. Until we'd find out if Karma would accept my intervention, or if it had other plans for us both. The hospital waiting rooms smelled like anxiety and cheap coffee. I sat between Leonel and Uncle Jack, watching the surgery clock tick past hour 3. She'll be okay, Leonel said, though his bouncing leg betrayed his nerves. The surgery isn't what I'm worried about. I checked my phone, another message from Roman asking for updates. It's what comes after. Ms. Ramos? A nurse appeared, clipboard in hand. Your mother's out of surgery. The doctor would like to speak with you. We followed her through sterile corridors to a consultation room where a tired-looking surgeon waited. The surgery was successful, he said without preamble. We removed all the infected tissue and foreign material. However, he paused, looking at each of us. The damage was extensive. She'll need several reconstructive procedures over the next year. But she'll live? Uncle Jack asked. Yes, she'll live, though her face will never be what it was. I almost laughed at the irony. When can we see her? She's in recovery now. 1 visitor at a time, 10 minutes each. Leonel went first, then Uncle Jack. I waited, trying to compose the text I'd been drafting to Louisa all morning. Your turn, Leonel said, returning. She's asking for you. Mom lay surrounded by machines, her face heavily bandaged. Only her eyes were visible, and they fixed on me the moment I entered. Victoria, she tried to smile but winced. You came. I said I would. I sat in the chair beside her bed. The doctor says you'll need more surgeries. I know. Her hand crept toward mine on the blanket but stopped short. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about telling the truth. And I want to do it, not just letters to you, but everything. The doctor who did this. There might be other women out there thinking about using him. There are. I pulled out my tablet, showing her what Louisa had found. At least 12 cases like yours in the past year. Help me stop him, she whispered. Help me make this right. You really want to do this? Go public, tell everyone how vanity nearly killed you? I want to be someone you can be proud of, her voice cracked. Even if it's too late. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Time's up. Wait, Mom caught my wrist as I stood. The letters. When should I start? When you're stronger. I gently removed her hand. Focus on healing first. Outside, I found Leonel and Uncle Jack in heated discussion with a hospital administrator. What's wrong? Insurance issue, Leonel explained. They're saying some of the follow-up procedures might not be covered. How much? Another 40,000 minimum. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of decisions yet to come. My phone buzzed. Roman. Victoria? Got a minute? Actually, the Peterson campaign loved your work. They want to double the contract. There's a significant bonus involved. I stepped away from the others. How significant? Enough to cover whatever you need for your mother's medical bills, plus some. Roman, I can't. Yes, you can. You earned this. The timing's just fortunate. Later that night, in my hotel room, I called Louisa. So, she said, Karma's got a sense of humour. More like a twisted sense of justice. I lay back on the bed. Mum wants to go public about everything. Help warn other women about that doctor. Do you believe her? I don't know. I stared at the ceiling. But I want to. That's something, isn't it? My laptop pinged, an email from Mum's nurse. She'd written her first letter, refusing to wait until she was stronger. "Dear Victoria," it began, "I've spent 8 years running from mirrors, but today I finally saw myself clearly. In the recovery room, looking at what my choices have cost me, I realized something. The ugliest part of me was never my face. It was what I did to you." The letter continued, raw and honest in a way my mother had never been. By the end, my cheeks were wet. "You okay?" Louisa asked, still on the phone. "No," I admitted. "But maybe that's okay." A text from Lionel lit up my phone. "Mom's asking if you'll come back tomorrow. Says she has more to say." I thought about the Peterson bonus, about karma's strange timing, about second chances that come disguised as consequences. "Tell her I'll be there," I typed back, "but remind her words are just the beginning." "What are you thinking?" Louisa asked. "I'm thinking about mirrors," I said, "and how sometimes we need to break before we can see ourselves clearly. Tomorrow would bring more decisions, more surgeries, more truth. But for now, in this moment, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not for forgiveness, that would take more than letters and confessions, but for understanding. For change. Maybe that's what karma had planned all along. "Are you ready?" I asked, adjusting Mum's collar as we sat in the television studio's green room. "No," she admitted, touching her face, still scarred but healing. "But I need to do this." The producer poked her head in. "5 minutes, Mrs. Ramos. Victoria, you'll be joining her after the first segment." Mum grabbed my hand. "What if I freeze? What if I can't?" "Then I'll be there." I squeezed back, surprising us both. "Just tell the truth. That's all anyone needs to hear." The interview started exactly as we'd prepared. Mum described her history with plastic surgery, the illegal doctor, the complications. But when the host asked about funding the original surgery, she went off script. "I stole the money," she said clearly, "from my daughter's college fund." The host leaned forward. "That must have been a difficult decision." "No," Mum's voice strengthened. "It wasn't difficult at all. That's what makes it so horrible. I took my child's future without a second thought, because I was so consumed by my own reflection." "Victoria," the host turned to me as I joined them, "how does it feel hearing your mother admit this on national television?" "Surreal," I said honestly. "For 8 years I waited for an acknowledgement, an apology, anything. Now, watching her face the consequences, both physical and emotional, I feel—" "Vindicated?" the host suggested. "Human," I corrected. "We're both finally being human with each other." After the interview back in the green room, Mum collapsed into tears. "I didn't think it would be so hard." "The truth usually is." I handed her a tissue. "But the doctor's other victims needed to hear it. They needed to know they're not alone." "Like I made you feel alone?" "Yes." My phone buzzed. Louisa sending a link to an online support group. Already women were sharing similar stories, thanking Mum for speaking out. "Look," I showed her the responses. "It's working." She read through the comments, her hands shaking. "I can't take back what I did to you." "No, you can't. But maybe I can prevent other mothers from doing the same to their daughters." She looked up at me. "Will you help me? With the support group, the advocacy work?" I studied her face, really looked at it. The scars would never fully heal, but there was something new in her eyes, something real. "On one condition," I said. "You keep writing the letters, not just for a year, but until we both feel whole again." "Deal." She hesitated, then added, "I read your response to my first letter. I meant every word. I know, especially the part about not being ready to forgive me. But I'm ready to try," I said softly. "That's more than I could say 8 years ago." The producer returned. "The segment's already going viral. We've got calls from 3 other networks wanting follow-up interviews." Mum looked at me, waiting. I nodded. "We'll do them. All of them. But first, there's somewhere we need to go." An hour later, we stood in front of UCLA's admissions office. Mum frowned. "Why are we here?" "Because," I pulled out an envelope, "part of moving forward is finishing what was interrupted." I handed her the acceptance letter, dated last week. I'm starting my master's degree in the fall, part-time while still working at the firm. But how? The Peterson bonus, remember? Turns out karma works in mysterious ways. I turned to face her. You took my dream once. Now I'm taking it back. Not out of spite, but because it's time. She touched the letter, then my face. This time I didn't pull away. You're everything I should have been, she whispered. No, I shook my head. I'm everything I chose to be, despite everything. That's the difference. My phone rang. Roman calling about another interview request. Before answering, I looked at Mom. Ready to keep telling our story? She squared her shoulders, touching one of her scars almost absently. Ready to tell the truth. And there it was. The thing I'd been waiting for all these years. Not just words of remorse, but actions. Not just apologies, but change. Real, measurable, visible change. Victoria, she said as we walked back to the car. Thank you. Not for the money or the surgery, but for showing me how to face myself. I thought about the journey, from betrayal to revenge to something more complex, more human, about karma and choices and the people we become. Mom, I said, using the word intentionally for the first time in years. We're going to be okay. And for the first time, I believed it. Not because everything was fixed, but because we were finally facing the same direction, toward truth, toward healing, toward whatever came next. Together.
I'm Clara, a 40-year-old French teacher. Life was pretty standard, filled with books, classes, and the occasional coffee with friends. I never expected it to take a dramatic turn until Mrs. Lefevre, an old friend of my mother's, decided to play matchmaker. One afternoon, while I was sipping tea at my mother's house, Mrs. Lefevre dropped by. She was a lively woman in her 60s, always with a story to tell or a plan up her sleeve. Clara, dear, I have the perfect man for you, she exclaimed as she settled into the armchair. I chuckled, a bit skeptical. Really, Mrs. Lefevre? And who might this perfect man be? She leaned in, her eyes twinkling with excitement. My son, David. He's a widower, a wonderful father to 2 teenagers. I think you two would hit it off. I hesitated, the idea of stepping into a ready-made family seemed daunting. I don't know, Mrs. Lefevre. Stepping into a family, it's a lot. She waved her hand dismissively. Nonsense. You're a warm, loving person. And David is such a caring man. Plus, the kids are lovely, really. My mother, who had been listening quietly, joined in. Clara, it wouldn't hurt to meet him. You never know what life has in store for you. Encouraged by their enthusiasm, I agreed. A meeting was set up at a local cafe the following week. The day arrived, and I found myself sitting across from David, a man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. We talked about everything, from our jobs to our hobbies. He was a civil engineer and loved hiking, while I shared stories about my teaching and my love for French literature. Your mom tells me you're a fantastic teacher, David said, smiling warmly. I blushed slightly. Well, I love my job. Teaching French is my passion. And your mom mentioned you're quite the hiker. He laughed. Yeah, when I get the chance. But with Sophie and Max, my free time is usually spent on more family-oriented activities. The way he spoke about his children, Sophie and Max, was endearing. They were 14 and 12, stepping into the challenging teenage years. We all have our hands full with teenagers, don't we? I joked, thinking of my rowdy students. By the time we finished our coffees, I felt a connection with David, a sense of understanding and mutual respect. We agreed to meet again, and I found myself looking forward to it. After David and I got married, life settled into a comfortable routine that I cherished deeply. The addition of Sophie and Max, David's children, into my life was a source of joy, filling a gap I didn't know existed. I loved being a part of their lives, even though they never called me Mom. The bond we shared was unique and special in its own way. One lazy Sunday afternoon, I found myself in the kitchen, baking cookies with Sophie. The air was filled with the sweet aroma of chocolate and vanilla. "Clara, do you think these cookies will turn out okay?" "I'm not very good at this," Sophie said, a hint of doubt in her voice as she mixed the dough. I smiled at her. "You're doing great, Sophie. Baking is like learning a new language. It takes a little practice, but you'll get the hang of it." Sophie beamed, her confidence boosted. "Thanks, Clara. It's fun baking with you." Just then, Max bounded into the kitchen, his energy almost palpable. "What's cooking, ladies?" "It smells awesome. We're making cookies. Want to help us with the decorations later?" I asked, knowing his creative flair would add a fun element to our baking. Max nodded enthusiastically. "Sure. I'll make them look super cool." The afternoon passed with laughter and light-hearted banter. It was moments like these that made our house a home. Later that evening, as we sat down for dinner, the conversation turned to our plans for the upcoming holiday. "How about we go hiking this year? There are some great trails not far from here," David suggested, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Sophie seemed intrigued. "Can we camp overnight? I've always wanted to try that." Max chimed in, "Yeah, and maybe do some fishing too." I watched the animated discussion, feeling a warm sense of belonging. "That sounds like a great idea. A little adventure for the family," I added. David reached across the table, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. "Thanks for being so open to this, Clara. I know outdoor stuff isn't really your thing." I laughed. "Well, I might not be the outdoorsy type, but I'm definitely up for new experiences. Especially with you all." The dinner continued with plans and ideas being tossed around, each of us contributing to the holiday itinerary. It was a simple meal, but the warmth and love that filled the room made it memorable. That night, as David and I cleaned up the kitchen, he turned to me, his expression soft. "Clara, I just want to say, you've been amazing with the kids. They've really opened up to you." I leaned against the counter, a contented sigh escaping my lips. "I love them, David. They're great kids, and I just want to be there for them, in whatever way they need." He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. In that embrace, I felt the strength of our family bond. It was a bond that had grown over shared experiences, mutual respect, and love. I went to bed that night feeling grateful and fulfilled. Shortly after our wedding, David's mother, Mrs. Lefevre, suffered a stroke that left her paralyzed. In the blink of an eye, our lives changed drastically. I took on the responsibility of caring for her, balancing this new role with my job as a French teacher and managing household chores. These were challenging times, but I found solace in providing comfort to someone who had welcomed me with open arms into their family. Years passed, and Mrs. Lefevre's health continued to decline. Then, one fateful morning, she passed away. The loss hit me harder than I expected. She had become like a second mother to me. The day after her passing, the house was quiet, an eerie calm that felt unnatural. I was in the kitchen, lost in my thoughts, when David and the kids came in. Their expressions were solemn, but there was a strange undercurrent of anticipation in their voices. "Mom's lawyer will be here this afternoon to discuss the will," David said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Sophie chimed in, her tone surprisingly light. "I wonder what Grandma left for us. She always said she had some savings aside." I was taken aback by their conversation. Shouldn't we be focusing on arranging a proper service for her? She was a big part of this family. David shrugged. "We'll take care of that, but there's no harm in looking ahead, Clara. Mom would have wanted us to." As the day progressed, their excitement over the inheritance became more apparent. It was as though Mrs. Lefevre's passing was merely a pathway to financial gain. I couldn't help but feel disturbed by this blatant display of greed. That evening, After the lawyer's visit, David and the kids gathered in the living room, eagerly discussing the inheritance. I stood at the doorway, listening to them. "So, we're getting a good amount, then?" Max asked, his eyes gleaming. David nodded. "Yes, enough to make some significant changes around here." Sophie's laughter filled the room. "Finally, I can get that new laptop I wanted." I stepped into the room, unable to contain my disappointment. "Is this really what's important right now? Your mother just passed away." David looked at me, his expression cold. "Clara, you wouldn't understand. This is family stuff." I felt a sting at his words. "I cared for your mother for years, David. How can you say I wouldn't understand?" He scoffed, turning away. "Just because you looked after her doesn't mean you're entitled to anything. You did what any decent person would do." In the weeks that followed, David and the kids became increasingly distant and dismissive. Their attitude towards me changed from indifference to outright rudeness. David's remarks became more cutting, and the children, following his lead, treated me with a lack of respect that I had never experienced before. One evening, as I was setting the dinner table, David walked in, his face stern. "Clara, you need to step up your game around here. The house has been a mess lately." I looked around, bewildered. The house was as tidy as it always was. "I've been doing my best, David. I don't understand what's changed." He shrugged, his voice harsh. "Just saying, you could do better. After all, it's not like you're contributing much else around here." I felt a lump form in my throat. The man I had married, the family I had embraced, were now treating me like an outsider, an unwelcome burden. The shift in my family's demeanor after Mrs. Lefebvre's passing wasn't gradual, but a sudden plunge into a cold, unfeeling world. David and the children's behavior towards me transformed overnight from distant to openly hostile. Every day brought a new barrage of insults and nagging, and I was treated less like a family member and more like an unwelcome servant. One particularly harsh evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, David entered the kitchen, his face twisted in a sneer. "Clara, why is dinner not ready yet? You really can't do anything right, can you?" Stunned by his harsh tone, I replied, trying to keep my composure, "I'm doing the best I can, David. Dinner will be ready in a few minutes." He scoffed, looking around with disdain. "You know, I only tolerated you because you were useful, taking care of my mother and the kids. But now? You're just a burden." His words cut through me like a knife. I stood there, the plates in my hand feeling heavier than ever. Sophie walked in, her voice dripping with contempt. "Yeah, Clara, you should be grateful we even let you stay here. You're just a scary, old, and useless woman." Max, not to be outdone by his sister, chimed in mockingly, "Yeah, who would want you around? You're like a ghost haunting this house." Every word was a blow to my spirit. I had dedicated years of my life to this family, caring for them as my own, only to be reduced to this pitiful state. I served dinner in silence, their cruel laughter and jibes echoing around me. That night, as I lay in my bed, the day's events replayed in my mind. David's cruel declaration that I was nothing more than a now useless caretaker, Sophie's and Max's hurtful comments. It all hammered home the painful reality that the family I had loved and cared for saw me as nothing more than an expendable servant. The following days were no better. Every task I did was met with criticism and disdain. I was constantly reminded of my place in the household, a place that seemed to have no respect or kindness. One afternoon, as I was cleaning the living room, David walked in with a look of annoyance. "Clara, have you seen my blue tie? I can't seem to find it anywhere." "I washed and hung it in your closet yesterday, David," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, it's not there now. Can't you do anything right? You're just taking up space in this house," he snapped, storming off. I finished my cleaning, each sweep of the broom feeling heavier with the burden of his words. The home I once cherished now felt like a prison, filled with contempt and scorn. Living in a constant state of belittlement and disrespect had taken its toll on me. Each day in David's house was a battle against his and the children's growing cruelty. I began to contemplate the painful decision of leaving, but my worsening leg pain and the lack of financial resources made me feel trapped. One chilly morning, as I limped around the kitchen, preparing breakfast, David stormed in, his face twisted in annoyance. "Clara, why is everything taking so long? You're moving like a snail." I tried to hide my pain. "My legs aren't what they used to be, David. I'm moving as fast as I can." He rolled his eyes. "Excuses, always excuses. You're just a burden, you know that?" The words stung, but I remained silent, focusing on setting the breakfast table. Sophie and Max entered the kitchen, their expressions mirroring their father's impatience. "Ugh, why do we always have to wait for Clara? She's useless," Sophie muttered, sitting down with a huff. Max didn't bother to hide his disdain. "Yeah, if she can't even make breakfast properly, what good is she?" I served them breakfast, each word from them like a dagger to my heart. As they ate, I sat down at the far end of the table, my appetite gone. After breakfast, I retreated to my room, the pain in my legs growing with each step. The lack of empathy and the constant insults from David and the kids were unbearable. I sat on the edge of my bed, the reality of my situation sinking in. I needed to leave, but I was scared and unsure of how to proceed. Later that day, I mustered the courage to speak to David. I found him in the living room, reading a newspaper. "David, can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He glanced up, his expression one of irritation. "What is it now, Clara?" "I've been thinking, maybe it's best if I leave. I don't feel welcome here anymore," I said, my voice shaking. David looked at me, a smirk forming on his lips. "Leave? And go where? You have no money, no place to go. Your mother died without leaving you anything to inherit. You're stuck here, Clara, whether you like it or not." His words were a harsh reminder of my dire situation. I felt a sense of despair wash over me. He was right, I had nowhere to go. My job as a teacher had been my only source of income, and with my leg condition, I couldn't even do that anymore. I had to resign from school. It was a bitter, but the only right decision. The following days were a blur of household chores, nagging, and insults. David and the kids treated me with utter disregard, their words and actions reinforcing the painful truth that I was no longer a part of this family, but a mere inconvenience to them. As I struggled with my pain and loneliness, I began to secretly plan my escape. I started saving whatever little money I could, hiding it away for the day I could finally leave. The thought of freedom, of being away from the constant belittling and disrespect, was the only thing that kept me going. One afternoon, while David and the kids were out, I sat at my old laptop, nursing my aching legs. Browsing aimlessly, I discovered a website for online tutoring. A thought struck me: could I leverage my skills as a French teacher in a new, virtual setting? Hesitant, but driven by a newfound purpose, I set up a profile on the site. "Experienced French teacher available for online lessons," I typed, my heart racing with both nervousness and excitement. The next few days were a whirlwind. To my amazement, requests for lessons began to pour in. My afternoons, once filled with loneliness and despair, were now occupied with teaching French to eager students from around the world. One day, as I finished a lesson, Sophie walked in, her eyes narrowing at the sight of the laptop. "What are you doing?" she asked suspiciously. "I'm teaching French online." "It's something I'm good at," I replied, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my voice. She scoffed. "As if anyone would want to learn from you." I ignored her remark, feeling a sense of pride in my small but significant accomplishment. As weeks turned into months, my reputation as an online French tutor grew. I started earning enough to entertain the idea of independence, of a life away from the constant degradation I faced at home. The days that followed saw me juggling my newfound career with the household chores. Despite the physical pain and the emotional drain of living in a hostile environment, I found solace and strength in my teaching. Each lesson I gave was a step closer to freedom, a reminder that I was capable, valuable, and deserving of respect. The tension in the house reached its zenith the evening David announced his promotion at work. That night at dinner, the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. David, Sophie, and Max were unusually chatty, their voices laced with a smug satisfaction that sent a chill down my spine. As I served dinner, trying to ignore the dull ache in my legs, David cleared his throat, ready to make his announcement. "I've got some news. I got a promotion at work. With it, I bought a new house. Bigger, better, and it suits our new status." Sophie clapped her hands in delight. "That's amazing, Dad. When do we move?" David's gaze shifted to me, cold and calculating. "We will be moving soon. But Clara won't be joining us." The room went silent. I looked up, my heart sinking. "What do you mean, David?" He smirked, his words cutting through the air like a knife. "You're not coming, Clara. You don't belong in that part of our lives. You were useful once, but not anymore." Sophie joined in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Yeah, Clara. You're just an old, limping woman. What use would you be in our new house?" Max laughed, adding insult to injury. "You should be grateful we let you stay here this long." I stood there, the plates in my hands trembling. The pain of their words was sharper than any physical ache I had ever felt. David slid the divorce papers across the table to me. "I think it's best we part ways. You can stay here until the house is sold." Numb, I picked up the papers. My hands were shaking as I signed them. There was no point in arguing or pleading. The people I had once called family had shown their true colors, and they were ugly and cruel. The next morning, I began to put my plan into action. While David and the kids were out, I packed my belongings. Each item I placed in the suitcase was a step towards my freedom. When David and the kids returned, they found me at the door, suitcase in hand. David's expression was one of surprise and confusion. "What are you doing, Clara?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of concern. I straightened my back, facing them with a newfound strength. "I'm leaving, David. I will not stay here and be treated like a worthless burden." David scoffed. "Where will you go? You have nothing." I smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. "I have more than you think. I have my dignity, my skills, and I have plans. You will not see me begging." In my rented apartment, a modest but serene space, I was rebuilding my life, one online French lesson at a time. The freedom and tranquility here were in stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere I had escaped from. One evening, as I was reviewing lesson plans, my phone erupted with the frantic ringing of a call from David. His voice, laced with panic and anger, filled the room. "Clara, what the hell have you done? Sending those recordings to my boss? Do you have any idea what you've caused?" he bellowed, the sound of his fury resonating through the phone. I leaned back in my chair, a smirk playing on my lips. "Oh, you mean the recordings of all the lovely things you and the kids said to me?" "Yes, I did send them." In the background, I could hear the unmistakable cries of Max and Sophie. "Tell her to fix this, Dad. She's ruined everything." David's voice cracked with desperation. "Clara, please. Because of those recordings, I'd been demoted. I can't afford the mortgage on the new house. You have to help us." The sounds of their pleading were music to my ears. "Help you? After the way you all treated me? You made your bed, David. Now lie in it." His voice rose to a near scream. "You can't do this to us. We're your family." I laughed, a deep, hearty sound that felt liberating. Family? No, family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. You and your kids were nothing but cruel and abusive. This is your karma, David. Sophie's voice cut through, shrill and pleading. Clara, please. We didn't mean any of it. We'll change, I swear. Max joined in, his voice laced with fear. Yeah, Clara, please. We're sorry. We need you. I stood up, pacing the room as I replied, sorry? Your words and actions broke me. But guess what? I picked up the pieces and put myself back together. Without you, I owe you nothing. David's voice was a mix of rage and helplessness. You're going to let us lose everything? I stopped pacing, standing tall and proud. Yes, David, I am. You and the kids have made your bed, and now you get to sleep in it. Goodbye. I hung up the phone, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. I had stood up to them, not with malice, but with the strength they never thought I had. Over the following weeks, I heard from mutual friends that David and the kids were struggling. They couldn't pay the mortgage, and the bank had taken over the house. They were forced to move into a small rented apartment, and both Sophie and Max had to take up jobs to help make ends meet. As for me, my online tutoring was flourishing. I was saving money, not just for my day-to-day needs, but for a house of my own. A place where I could live in peace, away from the shadows of my past. I'm Irene, navigating life at 30 with a mix of web design and motherhood. Our family nucleus was simple: me, my husband Mike, and our 2-year-old sunshine, Danny. Our world was comfortably wrapped within the walls of our home, which stood as a testament to the life we built together. Mike worked for my dad's company, a job he was proud of, and I carved pixels into designs from my home studio. Our routine was pleasantly mundane until one evening at my parents' house, where family dinners were more than just meals. They were gatherings punctuated by discussions, laughter, and, sometimes, life-changing announcements. So, I'd been thinking, my dad began, his voice commanding the room's attention. He was a self-made man, a pillar of wisdom in business suits. We're expanding the company. There's a new branch opening in the neighboring city, and I want Mike to take the lead on this. Mike, who had always admired my dad, perked up immediately. His eyes gleamed with a mix of excitement and determination. Mr. Thompson, that's a fantastic opportunity. I'm all in. I felt a surge of pride and excitement. That's wonderful news. We should all move there for the project duration. It's just a few months, and it'll be like a little adventure, I said, already envisioning our temporary life in a new city. Unexpectedly, Mike hesitated, casting a glance that didn't quite reach his usual confidence. Actually, Irene, it might be better if you and Danny stay here. Moving could be a hassle for the little guy. His words hit me unexpectedly, like a cold splash of reality in our warm, cozy life. But Mike, I thought we were in this together. And it's not like we have to uproot our lives. I can work from anywhere, and it would be a nice change for Danny. My dad nodded in agreement, his voice echoing my thoughts. Mike, Irene has a point. The family should stick together in such times. And Irene's job gives her that flexibility. Mike seemed to be caught off guard, a nervous chuckle escaping him. I was just joking. Of course, you both should come along. But that joke didn't sit right with me. It lingered in the air, an uninvited guest at our family dinner. The evening progressed with Dad and Mike diving into the logistics of the new business venture, but my mind was stuck on Mike's initial reaction. Why the hesitation? Why the reluctance? Later that night, after tucking Danny into bed, I found myself sitting across from Mike in our living room. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my mind. Mike, about dinner tonight. I started, my voice a blend of confusion and concern. You really caught me off guard, suggesting that Danny and I shouldn't join you. Is there something on your mind? He looked up from his phone, meeting my gaze for the first time since we sat down. Irene, I didn't mean to upset you. It's just that setting up a new branch will be demanding. I thought it'd be easier for you to stay put, avoid the stress of moving. I leaned forward, searching his face for the familiar comfort. But we've always faced challenges together. That's what we do. Why would this time be any different? Mike sighed, putting his phone down. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. You're right, we do. And we will. I guess I was just overthinking it. It was a silly thought, nothing more. His words were meant to reassure, but they hung heavy in the room, a reminder that something in our equation had shifted, however slightly. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs just when you think you've got it all figured out. Our little family was on the brink of a new adventure, or so I thought, until Danny, our 2-year-old bundle of joy, decided to rewrite our plans. It started with a mild fever, nothing too alarming at first, but it quickly escalated. I remember holding Danny in my arms, feeling his little body burning up as I dialed our family doctor. Dr. Jacobs, Danny's fever isn't coming down. I'm really worried, I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. After a thorough checkup, Dr. Jacobs' expression was serious. Irene, I'm afraid it's more than just a common cold. Danny needs rest and cannot travel for a while. Moving to a new city is out of the question right now. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I called Mike that evening, the weight of uncertainty heavy in my voice. Mike, Danny's sick. The doctor advised against traveling. We can't join you for now. On the other end, there was a pause before Mike responded. His voice was calm, almost too calm. Oh, is it serious? Well, that's okay, Irene. He needs to get better. We can manage. Something about his response didn't sit right with me. There was an undertone of relief, perhaps even contentment, that Danny and I wouldn't be joining him. It gnawed at me, that unsettling feeling of doubt. The weeks that followed were tough. Danny's illness turned out to be a stubborn infection that took its time healing. My days and nights merged into a blur of caregiving, leaving little room for anything else. Mike's calls became infrequent, and when he did call, his words felt rehearsed, lacking the warmth I was used to. Everything's okay here, Irene. Just busy with work. How's Danny? I'd update him, hoping for more engagement, but the conversations were brief and perfunctory. He's getting better, slowly. We miss you, Mike. Yeah, I miss you guys too, he'd reply, but it sounded hollow, as if he was saying it out of obligation rather than feeling. The distance was growing, not just in miles, but in our connection. It felt like Mike was slipping away, retreating into a world I wasn't part of. One evening, after a particularly short and unsatisfying call with Mike, I sat in the living room long after Danny had fallen asleep. The silence of the house echoed my thoughts. Was this what our life was going to be now? Mike distant and preoccupied, and me, alone, holding down the fort? Days turned into weeks, and the distance between Mike and me felt more than just miles apart. It was as if he was slowly drifting away, becoming a stranger. His calls, once filled with laughter and warmth, were now just formal check-ins. One evening, as I was putting Danny to bed, my phone buzzed. It was Mike. Hey, how's Danny doing? He asked, his voice lacking its usual tenderness. He's better, still recovering, I replied, hoping to stir some emotion in him. Work's crazy here, he said, sounding distracted. I sat down in the living room, the silence engulfing me. Mike, we barely talk these days. Is everything okay with you? You seem different. There was a pause on the line. Different? No, I'm just really busy, Irene. You know how it is starting up a new branch. I tried to keep the conversation going, to bridge the growing gap. I understand you're busy, but it feels like you're not just physically away. It's like I don't know you anymore. He let out a sigh. Irene, you're overthinking it. It's just stress, that's all. Once things settle down here, it'll be better. But his reassurances did little to ease my growing concerns. His words felt empty, devoid of the connection we once shared. Weeks passed, and Mike's brief return home did little to quell my fears. He was physically present but emotionally distant. He spent most of his time either working on his laptop or engrossed in his phone. One night, I decided to confront him. Mike, we need to talk. You've been distant ever since you took this new job. Is there something you're not telling me? He looked up from his phone, his expression a mix of annoyance and surprise. Irene, why do you keep saying that? I'm right here. But you're not really. You're always on your phone or laptop. It's like you're here, but your mind is somewhere else, I said, my voice tinged with frustration. Mike closed his laptop with a sigh. Look, Irene, I've got a lot on my plate right now. The new branch, the pressures from your dad, it's a lot to handle. I'm just trying to do my best. I nodded, trying to understand. I get that, Mike, but we're a team, remember? If there's something bothering you, you can talk to me. He shook his head, a half smile on his face. There's nothing to talk about, Irene. I'm just busy, that's all. You're making a big deal out of nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like a chasm was forming between us, one that I couldn't bridge, no matter how hard I tried. The day started routinely enough, with the familiar hum of my computer and the soft breathing of Danny during his nap. I was deep in thought, maneuvering through the complexities of a web design project, when a knock at the door jolted me back to reality. Opening it, I found myself face to face with a stranger, his eyes weary yet determined. Can I help you? I asked, curiosity mingling with a hint of apprehension. Yes, you're Irene, Mike's wife, right? I'm David. His voice was steady but carried an undercurrent of nervousness. I nodded, still unsure where this was going. That's me. What is this about? David took a deep breath, as if bracing himself. I believe your husband, Mike, is having an affair with my wife. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. That's impossible, I stammered, disbelief clouding my thoughts. Mike wouldn't do that. There's got to be some mistake. I thought the same at first, David admitted, reaching into his pocket. But then I found this. He handed me his phone, his hand shaking slightly. The photos displayed on the screen were heart-wrenching. There was Mike, undeniably him, in a series of intimate moments with a woman I didn't recognize. They were laughing, embracing, their closeness leaving no room for doubt. I felt my world spin as I handed back the phone. Why are you showing me this? My voice cracked, barely a whisper under the weight of my crumbling reality. David's gaze was sympathetic yet firm. Because you deserve to know the truth. And I think we should do something about it. A mixture of emotions surged through me, anger, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of loss. What do you mean, do something about it? He leaned against the door frame, his posture suggesting a man who had nothing left to lose. I have a plan. A way to confront them, to bring this out into the open. I can't just let this go, and I don't think you should either. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to shut the door and pretend this never happened, but another, stronger part knew I couldn't live with the uncertainty. What kind of plan? We need more evidence, something undeniable. I propose we catch them together, in the act, David explained, his voice laced with a mix of pain and resolve. The idea was daunting, yet it resonated with the part of me that craved closure. How would we do that? I know where and when they meet. If you're willing, we can confront them, together, he proposed, his eyes searching mine for a decision. The thought of facing Mike in such a scenario was terrifying, yet the need for the truth, for some semblance of control in the chaos, was overpowering. Okay, I'm in. I need to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As David left, I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of the decision I had just made. The path ahead was fraught with pain and uncertainty, but I knew there was no turning back. The truth was out there, and I had to face it, for my sake and for Danny's. The reality of what David and I were about to do hit me as we sat in the dimly lit apartment next door to Mike's. We were there to unveil the truth, using the thin walls to our advantage. The apartment, ironically provided by my father's company for Mike, was now the stage for uncovering his betrayal. David was setting up a small recording device, his hands steady but his eyes betraying a storm of emotions. "Can't believe it's come to this," he muttered, more to himself than to me. I nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Neither can I. But we need to know, right?" As we waited, the silence between us was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and questions. Then, the sound of a door opening next door broke the stillness. My heart skipped a beat, and I saw David tense up. "That's them," he said, his voice barely a whisper. We moved closer to the wall, straining to hear. The voices were muffled at first, but then clearer. It was Mike, his laughter unmistakable, mingling with a woman's voice, his mistress. I clenched my fists, fighting back a surge of emotions. The intimacy in their voices was like a knife twisting in my heart. "Are you getting this?" David asked, his voice tight with anger. I nodded, holding the recorder close to the wall. "Yes, it's all being recorded." The sounds from the other side of the wall continued, laughter, conversation, and then unmistakably more intimate noises. It was excruciating to sit there, hearing Mike betray our family so blatantly. But amid the heartache, there was a growing sense of resolve. We were gathering the evidence we needed, undeniable proof of their betrayal. After what felt like an eternity, the noises ceased, and a heavy silence fell over our makeshift surveillance spot. David and I exchanged a look, a mix of sorrow and determination in our eyes. "We have what we need," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Now we confront them." David nodded, his jaw set. "Let's do it now. No point waiting." As we stood up, I felt a strange sense of empowerment mixed with dread. The life I had known with Mike was over, and confronting him was the first step into a new, uncertain future. "We need to catch them off guard," David said as we moved toward the door. I agreed, clutching the recorder like a lifeline. "Let's go. It's time they faced the consequences." Stepping out of the apartment, the weight of the moment settled on my shoulders. We were about to face the people who had turned our lives upside down. The confrontation would be painful, but necessary. David and I stood in the dimly lit corridor outside Mike's apartment, our hearts racing with a mix of anxiety and determination. The plan was simple, but bold. David would pretend to be a courier, a ruse to ensure Mike would open the door. David knocked firmly, announcing loudly enough to be heard through the door, "Delivery." We heard footsteps approaching from inside. The door swung open, and there stood Mike, his face transitioning from annoyance to shock as his eyes landed on me. "Irene? What the hell are you doing here?" I took a deep breath, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil inside. "We need to talk, Mike. Can I come in?" Behind Mike, the mistress, a young woman with a startled expression, stood frozen. Reluctantly, Mike stepped aside, allowing us entry. The room felt tense, charged with unspoken accusations and fear. Without mincing words, David confronted Mike. "We know about the affair, Mike. You can drop the act." Mike's reaction was a mix of defensiveness and scorn. This is nothing. She seduced me. I was just caught up." His mistress, now visibly shaken, retorted, "What? No, you were as much in this as I was." Ignoring her, Mike turned to me, trying to downplay the situation. Irene, listen, this isn't what it looks like. I couldn't hold back any longer. Not what it looks like? I heard everything, Mike. We have recordings. Mike glanced at the recording device in David's hand, his face turning pale. Recordings? Irene, you've got to understand. There's nothing to understand, I cut him off, my voice rising in anger. You betrayed our family, Mike. You betrayed me and Danny. He started to say something but stopped, realizing the gravity of his situation. Irene, please, Mike's voice trailed off as he fell to his knees, a pathetic figure of desperation. Forgive me, I made a mistake. Please, don't tell your father about this. I looked down at him, feeling a mix of pity and revulsion. You think I can just forgive and forget? I'm going to demand compensation for this betrayal. And yes, I will tell my father. He deserves to know the kind of man you really are. Mike's face crumpled in despair, but there was no going back. The trust we had was shattered, beyond repair. David, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. You're going to pay for this, Mike. Both of you. The mistress, now crying, looked completely overwhelmed. I didn't mean for it to go this far. As we left the apartment, leaving Mike and his mistress to their own messy reality, I felt a strange sense of closure. It was painful and heart-wrenching, but necessary. The confrontation was over, and with it, a chapter of my life had ended. Stepping out into the brisk evening air, the weight of what had just transpired in Mike's apartment hung heavily over me. David and I walked in silence to a nearby park bench. The noise of the city around us felt distant, muffled by the shock and turmoil churning inside. David was the first to break the silence. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Irene. But at least now you know the truth. I nodded, feeling numb. Yes, the truth. I paused, gathering my thoughts. What are you going to do now? He looked down, his hands clenched tightly. I need to think. There's a lot to process. But one thing is clear, I can't stay with her after this. I understand, I said softly. The reality of my own situation was beginning to sink in. I need to start planning for a life without Mike, for Danny's sake. David looked at me, empathy in his eyes. If you need anything, any help, just let me know. I managed a weak smile. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. We sat there for a while longer, lost in our own thoughts, before parting ways. As I walked back to my parents' house, where Danny was staying, the magnitude of the situation hit me. My marriage was over, and the life I had known was shattered. When I arrived, my parents immediately sensed something was wrong. Irene, what happened? You look upset, my mom asked, concern etched on her face. I sighed, not sure where to begin. Mom, Dad, I found out Mike has been having an affair. The room went silent. My dad's expression hardened. Are you sure? I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. Yes, I'm sure. I heard them, and I have recordings. My mom reached out, taking my hand. Oh, Irene, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do? I'm going to file for divorce, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I can't be with him after this. It's over. My dad, always the protector, spoke up. He won't get away with this. I'll make sure of that. And you and Danny will always have a home here. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, grateful for their support. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you both. The final chapter of my marriage to Mike was written in a lawyer's office, amidst a sea of paperwork and legal jargon. The divorce process was grueling but necessary. I fought hard, with my lawyer by my side, to ensure that Danny and I would have the financial security we needed. The court granted me alimony and compensation for Mike's betrayal, a small solace in the wake of our shattered life. Meanwhile, David, the man who had been thrust into my life by our shared misfortune, also finalized his divorce. His wife, once living a life of luxury, now faced a starkly different reality. She had to trade her affluent lifestyle for a job as a saleswoman in a retail store, a harsh consequence of her actions. As for Mike, the repercussions of his infidelity were far-reaching. My father, once a mentor and supporter, was ruthless in his response. He not only fired Mike from the company, but also made it clear that he would use his influence to prevent Mike from securing a position in any reputable firm. The man who once had a promising career now juggled two menial jobs, struggling to make ends meet. Life after the divorce was a journey of healing and rediscovery for me. I focused on raising Danny, ensuring that the upheaval in our lives didn't dim his bright, innocent spirit. Watching him grow, laugh, and explore the world was a balm to my bruised heart. My work as a web designer provided not just a financial lifeline, but also a welcome distraction. I threw myself into my projects, finding joy and fulfillment in creating and designing. It was a reminder that despite the chaos, I still had control over some aspects of my life. My parents were my rock during this time. They provided unwavering support, offering a safe haven for Danny and me. "You're stronger than you realize, Irene," my dad would often say. And as time passed, I began to believe him. In the quiet moments, often after I had put Danny to bed, I would reflect on the tumultuous journey. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it was slowly being replaced by a newfound strength and independence. I had navigated through the darkest of times and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but certainly stronger. As I closed the chapter on a painful part of my life, I opened a new one, filled with possibilities and the promise of a fresh start. My journey was not over, it was merely taking a new path, one that I was ready to travel with hope and determination. I'm Mary, 29, an accountant. I've always been the kind of person who thrives on order and predictability. But then, life threw me a curveball named Mike. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. The moment I walked in, I spotted him across the room, laughing loudly, the center of attention. I was content to stay in the background, but my friend, Jess, had other ideas. "Mary, you've got to meet Mike. He's hilarious," Jess insisted, dragging me over to him. I remember thinking, this is going to be awkward, but to my surprise, it wasn't. Mike was easygoing, his laughter infectious. I found myself laughing more in that one evening than I had in months. "Hey, I'm Mike." "And you are?" he asked with a smile that reached his eyes. "Mary. Nice to meet you," I replied, a bit more enthusiastically than I intended. He cracked a joke about accountants being party animals in disguise, and I couldn't help but laugh. We spent the rest of the evening chatting. He was into graphic design, loved indie music, and had a passion for cooking. I remember leaving the party feeling lighter, happier. Mike had this way of making everything seem fun and exciting. Over the next few weeks, we saw a lot of each other. He'd show up at my apartment with takeout from the newest restaurant in town or tickets to a concert. "Life's too short for routines, Mary. Gotta mix it up," he'd say. I was drawn to his spontaneity, a stark contrast to my structured life. He had this knack for pulling me out of my comfort zone, and I loved it. But I started to notice little things. Like how he'd casually drop $100 on a night out without a second thought, or how he'd switch jobs because he got bored with the old one. I tried talking to him about it once. We were at my place, and I broached the subject as delicately as I could. "Mike, don't you think you should be a bit more careful with money? And maybe stick with a job longer?" He just laughed it off. "Mary, you worry too much. Life's about having fun. Money, jobs, they come and go." I wanted to argue, to explain that that's not how the world works, but I didn't. I let it slide, telling myself that it was just Mike being Mike. When he proposed, it was out of the blue. We were walking in the park, and he just blurted it out. "Marry me, Mary. Let's make this adventure official." It was impulsive, irrational, and completely Mike. And I said yes. We moved in together, into my house. It seemed like the perfect start to our life together. And I thought, maybe, just maybe, opposites could really attract and hold together. The days of laughter and impromptu adventures with Mike gradually gave way to a sobering reality. His carefree attitude, once the source of our connection, started to feel more like a growing divide. It was a Thursday evening when the first major crack appeared. I had stayed late at work to catch up on some demanding accounts. Tired and hungry, I arrived home, hoping for a quiet night. Instead, I walked into a scene that looked like the aftermath of a shopping spree. Bags from various stores were strewn across the living room, and there was Mike, lounging on the sofa with a self-satisfied grin. "Mary, you're home. Look at these deals I found today," he exclaimed, gesturing towards the bags. I dropped my keys on the table, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "Mike, we talked about this last week, about saving money and cutting down on unnecessary expenses." He shrugged, flipping through a magazine. "Yeah, but these were on sale. Besides, we needed some of these things." I picked up a receipt from one of the bags and felt my heart sink. "Needed? Mike, these are luxury items, not essentials. We have a budget for a reason." Mike looked up, his expression shifting from casual to defensive. "Come on, Mary, don't be such a killjoy. We deserve to treat ourselves once in a while." I sighed, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's not about being a killjoy, Mike. It's about being responsible. We have bills, a mortgage, and we agreed to save for a rainy day." He rolled his eyes and tossed the magazine aside. "You always make a big deal out of everything. Can't you just relax for once?" Then, one morning, I found an envelope addressed to Mike on the dining table. It was from his workplace. Curious, I opened it and felt my world tilt. Mike had resigned from his job without a word to me. When he finally came down for breakfast, I confronted him, the letter in my hand. "Mike, what is this? You quit your job? Why didn't you discuss it with me first?" He poured himself coffee, unfazed. "Yeah, I quit. That job was a dead end, Mary. I need something better, something that excites me. But how are we going to manage our expenses? We need 2 incomes, Mike." "You know this," I said, my voice rising with frustration. He shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. "We'll figure it out. We always do. You need to stop worrying so much." "How can I not worry? We have financial commitments, Mike. This is not just about you or me, it's about us, our future," I argued, trying to make him see reason. Mike set down his cup with a thud. "I can't deal with this right now, Mary. You're suffocating me with all this talk about money and responsibility." I watched in disbelief as he walked away, leaving me standing in the kitchen, letter in hand, feeling more alone than ever. Mike's unemployment, which initially seemed like a short-term hiccup, rapidly grew into a persistent source of stress and contention in our household. Each morning, as I prepared for work, I'd find Mike in the same spot on the couch, engrossed in either the TV or his phone. The sight became a painful reminder of our growing financial strain. "Mike, it's been weeks since you quit your job. Have you started looking for something new?" I asked one morning, trying to mask the concern in my voice as I adjusted my work badge. He barely glanced up from his phone. "Yeah, I'm looking. Nothing's caught my eye yet. I'm waiting for the right opportunity." His nonchalant reply irked me. "Right opportunity? We have bills piling up, Mike. We can't wait forever." He finally looked up, his expression a mix of annoyance and indifference. "Mary, you need to chill. I know what I'm doing. I'll find something soon." Days turned into weeks, and the situation at home remained unchanged. I began to take on extra hours at work to keep up with our financial obligations, my exhaustion growing with each passing day. One evening, I came home to an unexpected scene. The living room was littered with pizza boxes and empty beer cans. Mike was sprawled on the couch, snoring lightly. The TV blared in the background. "Mike," I called out, frustration evident in my tone. He stirred and blinked at me sleepily. "What's up?" he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "What's up? Look at this mess. And dinner? Were you planning to cook tonight?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. He sat up, yawning. "Oh, I forgot. Got caught up with the game. Grab something on your way home next time." I felt a surge of anger. "I'm working extra hours to make ends meet, Mike. The least you could do is help around the house." He stood up, stretching lazily. "I didn't ask you to work extra. You're choosing to stress yourself out." The conversation escalated quickly. "Choosing to stress out? Mike, if I don't, how are we going to survive? You're sitting here doing nothing while I'm out there trying to keep us afloat." Mike's expression hardened. "I'm not doing nothing. I'm trying to find a job. You think I like being stuck at home? Trying? By sitting on the couch all day? You're not even trying, Mike. This isn't what I signed up for when we got married." I shot back, my voice tinged with both anger and sadness. Mike scoffed. "Well, sorry for not living up to your perfect standards, Mary. I didn't realize I married a nag." I was taken aback by his harsh words. "A nag? Is it too much to ask for a partner who contributes? I don't understand how you can be so relaxed about our situation." He grabbed his jacket, heading towards the door. "I need some air. I can't deal with this right now." The tension in our home had reached a boiling point. Every conversation with Mike about responsibility and our future ended in a heated argument, leaving a cold silence in its wake. I was tired, both physically from the extra hours at work and emotionally from the constant strain at home. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through bills and trying to make the numbers work, I realized something had to give. "Mike," I began, my voice steady but firm, "we need to talk. This can't go on any longer." He glanced up from his phone, his expression indifferent. "What now, Mary?" "It's about your job situation. Or rather, the lack of one. It's been months, Mike. We're sinking here, and you don't seem to care," I said, the frustration evident in my tone. Mike let out a heavy sigh. "Here we go again. Look, I'm trying, okay? You think I enjoy this? You think I like seeing you stressed all the time? Then do something about it. Find a job, any job. We need 2 incomes, Mike. We agreed on this when we got married." I shot back, my patience wearing thin. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You think it's so easy, huh? Just snap my fingers and a job appears? You don't get it, Mary. The market's tough. I need something that suits me." "Something that suits you?" I repeated, incredulous. "We don't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect job, Mike. We have bills, a mortgage, responsibilities." Mike paced the room, running his hands through his hair. "I can't deal with this pressure, Mary. It's constant with you. Nag, nag, nag." I stood up, facing him. "This is not about nagging, Mike. This is about our life, our future. If you can't understand that, then maybe this isn't going to work." Mike stopped pacing, his eyes meeting mine. "What are you saying?" I took a deep breath. "I'm saying that if you don't find a job, if you don't start taking our situation seriously, then maybe we need to rethink this marriage." The words hung heavy in the air between us. Mike's face hardened, and for a moment, he said nothing. Then, without a word, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sat back down, my hands trembling slightly. I hadn't meant for it to come to this, but the endless cycle of arguments and indifference had worn me down. Days passed with no word from Mike. The silence was both a relief and a worry. Then, late one evening, my phone rang, jolting me out of my thoughts. It was the hospital. "Mrs. Smith? Your husband, Mike Smith, was brought in after an accident. He's stable, but he sustained some injuries." The news hit me like a punch to the stomach. I rushed to the hospital, my mind racing with worry and 1,000 unanswered questions. The sterile, impersonal atmosphere of the hospital was a sharp contrast to the emotional turmoil I was feeling. Sitting beside Mike's hospital bed, I watched him, his leg in a bulky cast, his face reflecting pain and vulnerability. It was a side of Mike I hadn't seen before, and it stirred a complex mix of emotions within me. As Mike's eyes fluttered open, he squinted at me, confusion giving way to realization. "Mary? You're here." His voice was weak, laden with a mix of guilt and relief. I forced a smile, trying to keep the conversation light. "Yeah, I'm here. How are you feeling?" He winced as he tried to adjust his position. "Like I'd been run over." Which, I guess, isn't far from the truth. "What did the doctors say?" "They said you were lucky. The injury could have been worse. It's a severe fracture, and you'll need time to heal," I explained, watching his face for a reaction. Mike exhaled deeply, his eyes meeting mine. "Mary, I'm sorry. I've been such a fool, and now this." His voice trailed off. I sighed, feeling a wave of conflicting feelings. "Mike, we can sort through all that later. Right now, you need to focus on getting better." But he persisted, a hint of urgency in his tone. "No, I need to say this. I've been self-centered, and I've put you through so much. This accident, it's made me see things differently." I listened, unsure of how to respond. "I appreciate you saying that, Mike. But it's going to take more than words to fix what's been broken." He nodded solemnly. "I know, and I want to make it right. I'll find a job as soon as I'm able. I'll help out more around the house, whatever it takes." The conversation was briefly interrupted by the nurse who came in to check on Mike's vitals. After she left, we resumed our talk. "Mike, it's not just about the job or the housework. It's about us, our relationship. We've been drifting apart, and it's going to take effort to bridge that gap," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. He reached out, taking my hand. "I know I've messed up, Mary. But this accident, lying here, all I could think about was you. How much you mean to me, and how I've taken you for granted." I felt a lump in my throat. His words were touching, yet I was cautious. "I want to believe you, Mike. I really do. But we've had so many false starts. I need to see that you're serious about this change." The nurse returned, her cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to the heavy mood. "We're going to start some mild physiotherapy soon. It'll be a journey, but you're in good hands." After she left, Mike looked at me, a newfound resolve in his eyes. "I know it's going to be a long road, but I want you with me, Mary. If you're willing to give me that chance." Bringing Mike home from the hospital marked the beginning of a new, challenging chapter in our lives. His broken leg meant he was confined to the bed or the couch, and his dependence on me for the simplest of tasks was a stark change from his previous self-reliance. The first few days were a flurry of adjusting to the new routine. I juggled my work commitments with playing nurse to Mike. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Mike glaring at the TV, a frown etched on his face. "Mike, how are you feeling? Do you need anything?" I asked, dropping my bag and kicking off my shoes. He turned his head, his expression sour. "Where have you been? I've been calling out for help to get to the bathroom, and you were nowhere." I felt a twinge of guilt mixed with frustration. I had to stay late at work, Mike. You know my job is demanding. I can't just leave whenever I want. He scoffed. Well, maybe your job shouldn't be more important than your husband. As the days went on, Mike's demands grew. He wanted specific meals at specific times, his medication handed to him on the dot, and constant attention. If something wasn't to his liking, he made sure to voice his displeasure. One Saturday, I spent hours preparing his favorite dish, hoping it would lift his spirits. As I set the plate down in front of him, he looked at it and then up at me with disdain. "This is what you made? It's too salty. Can't you do anything right?" I felt my patience snap. "Mike, I've been running around all day, trying to take care of you and keep up with everything else. A little appreciation wouldn't hurt." He sneered, pushing the plate away. "Appreciation? For this? I'm stuck in this bed because of my leg, and all I ask is for a decent meal." I stood up, my hands trembling with anger. "You know what, Mike? I'm not your servant. I'm your wife, and I deserve some respect." Mike's eyes flashed with anger. "Respect? You want respect? How about respecting my condition? I'm the one who's suffering here." As I walked away to cool down, I realized that the man I was trying to help was becoming increasingly unrecognizable. The sweet, apologetic person I had seen in the hospital had vanished, replaced by someone who seemed to take pleasure in belittling me at every turn. That fateful day, I returned home from work earlier than usual. The house, usually quiet during these hours, echoed with an unfamiliar sound of laughter coming from Mike's room. My heart pounding, I tiptoed closer, a sense of dread growing with each step. Peering through the slightly open door, I saw Mike, animated and cheerful, chatting on the phone. "Oh yeah, I've settled in quite well here," he said with a laugh. "Mary doesn't have a clue." My breath caught in my throat. Who was he talking to? What was he talking about? A cold shiver ran down my spine as I processed his words. I backed away, my mind racing, then loudly re-entered the house, slamming the door to announce my presence. I composed myself and walked into his room. Mike, hearing the door slam, quickly changed his demeanor and ended the call. "Mary, you're back," he said, feigning weakness. "Hey, how are you feeling?" I asked, masking my turmoil with a concerned smile. "Just the same, you know," he replied, avoiding my gaze. The next day, I contacted a private detective, someone I knew from a previous work case. "I need you to find out everything about my husband's activities," I told him over the phone. "And there's a woman he might be involved with." While the detective did his work, I played the part of the dutiful wife. It was agonizing, acting as if everything was normal when every instinct screamed that my world was falling apart. 2 weeks later, the detective got back to me. The news was worse than I had imagined. Mike had been in an accident with his mistress, who was listed in the police reports. The detective provided me with her name, and a quick search on social media revealed her profile, filled with pictures of her and Mike looking intimately close. But there was more. The detective had uncovered Mike's gambling debts, a staggering amount that threatened to drown us financially. I sat in the living room, the evidence of Mike's betrayal laid out before me, feeling a mix of anger, disbelief, and heartache. How best to unveil his deceit? How to make him realize the gravity of his betrayal? For now, I kept these thoughts to myself, waiting for the right moment to turn the tables. The morning light filtered through the curtains as I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. Entering Mike's room, where he lay with his broken leg, I braced myself for the performance of a lifetime. "Mike, I need to talk to you about something important," I said, my voice calm but firm. He looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "What now, Mary? Can't you see I'm in pain here?" I maintained my composure. "I've made a decision for your better care. You're being moved to a state medical facility tomorrow. They're equipped to handle your rehabilitation more effectively." Mike's expression turned from annoyance to panic. "What? No, you can't do that. I want to stay here, with you. I'm sorry, Mike, but this is for the best. I'll start packing your things, I said, turning towards the door. As I closed it behind me, I heard the frantic rustling of sheets and Mike's hurried voice calling someone on the phone. She's sending me to some facility. You have to help me. About an hour later, a car pulled up outside. Mike's mistress barged into our house, her face a mask of determination and concern. She marched directly to Mike's room, with me trailing behind. I'm here to take him with me. He's not going to any facility, she declared, her voice laced with a sense of ownership. I followed her into the room, my heart pounding, but my face calm. I'm glad you're here. This was all a setup to get you to show your hand. Mike and his mistress exchanged a look of confusion and fear. What are you talking about, Mary? Mike asked, his voice quivering. I held up the evidence collected by the detective, photos of them together. This is the proof of your affair. I'll be seeking compensation for this betrayal. The mistress laughed, though her eyes betrayed her nervousness. I can pay whatever you want. He's coming with me. My smile was thin, but confident. You should know, he's neck-deep in gambling debts, and without a job, he can't afford his medical bills or insurance. Are you ready to handle all that? Her face went pale, the implications of what I'd said slowly sinking in. Mike's eyes darted between us, a look of utter helplessness on his face. But I can't deal with all that, she stammered, her confidence crumbling. Seems like he's your problem now, I said with a cold finality, turning to leave the room. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. I filed for divorce, ensuring I received a fair settlement for Mike's betrayal and deceit. His mistress, now burdened with his financial and medical responsibilities, quickly found herself overwhelmed. Rumors reached me over time about their strained relationship, riddled with arguments and financial woes. Mike's downfall was a tale of his own making, and his mistress was now ensnared in the web of consequences. As for me, I found solace in my newfound freedom and independence. The betrayal had been painful, a stark lesson in trust and deception. Yet, it also imparted a strength I never knew I had. I moved forward with my life, emboldened by my resilience and determined to find happiness on my own terms, free from the shadows of deceit and betrayal. Hello there, my name's Sarah. I'm 27 and I've been working as a nurse for a while. My life has been a whirlwind of hospital shifts, patient checkups, and endless cups of coffee. The hospital corridors have been my world, and my social life? Well, that's been on life support for a while now. So, what's a girl to do when she's got no time to meet people the old-fashioned way? She goes online. I signed up for this dating site, nothing fancy, just one of those places where you hope to find someone who's not a complete weirdo. That's where I bumped into Ryan, virtually of course. His profile was plain, no show-off stuff. Just a guy with a genuine smile and a twinkle in his eyes. We started trading messages, and something clicked. We decided to meet up, see if this online chemistry had any basis in the real world. Our first date was at this cozy little cafe downtown. I walked in, and there he was, waiting for me. Hey Sarah, you made it, he greeted, his face lighting up like a kid on Christmas morning. I was a bundle of nerves, but his easygoing nature calmed me down. We started chatting, just casual stuff at first. He was a software engineer, loved messing around with codes and all that. He was passionate about his work, but when he spoke about his mother, Margaret, his demeanor changed. I'm all she's got, you know, he said, his voice dropping a bit. My old man skipped out on us when I was just a kid. She's been alone since then. I try to help out, send her $1,000 every month. Ain't much, but it keeps her going. I admired his dedication, his sense of responsibility. I shared my own stories, about the grueling hours at the hospital, the emotional roller coaster that my job often was. He listened, really listened, not just nodding along. His eyes were full of understanding, and I felt a connection. As the weeks rolled by, I found myself falling for this guy. He was different, caring and attentive. He'd show up at the hospital when I was pulling late-night shifts, always with a hot meal in tow. He was a breath of fresh air in my otherwise monotonous life. One evening, while we were having dinner at his place, he looked at me, his eyes serious. "Sarah," he said, holding my hand across the table. "I've been doing some thinking. I really like you, more than just a girlfriend. I want us to be a team, you and me. What do you say, will you marry me?" His question caught me off guard. Sure, we hadn't been dating for too long, but there was no denying the love I felt for him. So, I said yes. We were over the moon, excited about our future together. But, boy, was I in for a ride. Little did I know that this decision would lead me down a path full of twists and turns. Life took a sudden turn after that dinner. I was now engaged to Ryan, a man I'd met online, who was as kind and caring as he was committed to his mom. The word fiancé had a new, exciting ring to it. We decided it was time to meet his mom, a woman who lived a couple of hours away in a small town. She was the epicenter of Ryan's world, the person whose opinion mattered the most to him. So, the plan was set: a weekend trip for the two of us to meet the woman who had raised my soon-to-be husband. The drive was filled with a strange tension. Ryan was visibly nervous, his fingers drumming on the steering wheel, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror more often than necessary. He was a man on edge, and it wasn't hard to guess why. "Ryan," I said, trying to soothe his nerves. "Relax. I'm sure your mom is a wonderful person." He shot me a half-smile, his eyes still on the road. "Yeah, she's something all right." His mom's house was a picture of quaint charm, a small structure that looked like it had jumped straight out of a home and garden magazine. As we pulled up, I saw her waiting for us on the porch, a frail figure with a spark of defiance in her eyes. "Ryan, my boy," Margaret exclaimed as soon as we got out of the car, enveloping him in a tight hug. After a moment, she turned to me, her gaze icy. "You must be Sarah." I extended a hand, forcing a smile. "Yes, ma'am. It's a pleasure to meet you." The afternoon was a whirlwind of conversation, a deep dive into Ryan's life and his mom's sacrifices. She painted a vivid picture of their shared journey, of the struggles they'd overcome together. It was touching, but also a bit overwhelming. "So, Sarah," she said at one point, her eyes boring into me. "Ryan tells me you're a nurse." I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I work at the city hospital." "And your family?" she asked, her gaze never wavering. "Who do you have?" I swallowed, a lump forming in my throat. I don't remember my parents. My grandmother raised me." She nodded, her eyes softening a bit. "Well, I suppose we all have our crosses to bear." The conversation took a strange turn then. She talked about blessing our marriage, but on one condition. We had to keep sending her the monthly $1,000. I was taken aback. I knew Ryan helped her out, but this felt different. It felt like a transaction. "Ma," Ryan said, his voice firm. "We're planning to get married, not sign a contract." Margaret shot him a stern look. "This is not a negotiation, Ryan. It's what I need." Ryan looked at me, his eyes pleading. It was a tough situation, one that I didn't want to escalate. So, I agreed. I agreed to this bizarre condition, for Ryan's sake. The wedding planning kicked off with a bang. Ryan and I were excited, brimming with ideas and dreams for our big day. We had decided on a simple ceremony, something that reflected our love and commitment without breaking the bank. After all, we had a significant monthly commitment to Ryan's mom, which kept our budget modest. But love, we believed, didn't need an extravagant show. Our venue was the local church, a charming little structure with an air of warmth and familiarity. Father John, the pastor and a dear friend of Ryan's, was more than willing to officiate our wedding. His twinkling eyes and hearty congratulations made us feel even more special. The guest list was a short one, a handful of work friends, Ryan's childhood buddies, and, of course, his mom. Margaret had a strong presence in our lives, and her involvement in the wedding planning was no different. She was there at every turn, her opinions shaping our choices, from the color scheme to the menu. "I think we should serve roast beef," she declared during one of our planning sessions. "Ryan loves it." Ryan, ever the dutiful son, nodded in agreement. "But Mom," he added, "Sarah's a vegetarian. We need to consider her too." His mom simply raised an eyebrow. "Well, it's your wedding too, isn't it?" Ryan didn't argue. He simply agreed and let his mom have her way. I didn't mind much. I was too caught up in the joy of marrying the man I loved. But there was another person who was deeply involved in our wedding planning, my grandmother. She was my rock, my guiding light. She had raised me single-handedly, and her wisdom and strength had always been my inspiration. Grandma was thrilled about the wedding. She helped me pick out a simple but elegant white dress. She baked cookies for the reception, her hands working magic in the kitchen. And she was there, always there, with a smile and a word of encouragement. The day of the wedding was a whirlwind of emotions. I was nervous, excited, and a little overwhelmed. Ryan looked dashing in his blue suit, his eyes sparkling with joy. His mom, in a striking red dress, was the life of the party, chatting and laughing with everyone. The ceremony was a beautiful, heartwarming affair. Father John spoke eloquently about love and commitment, his words resonating with everyone present. As Ryan and I exchanged our vows, I could see tears in Grandma's eyes. It was a moment I would cherish forever. The reception, held in the church hall, was a fun-filled event. The roast beef was a hit, and even though I couldn't partake, I was happy to see everyone enjoying it. Ryan's mom made sure to remind everyone that it was her idea. I didn't mind. I was too caught up in the joy of the day. As the day came to a close, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We were married. We were starting a new chapter in our lives. I knew there would be challenges, but I was ready to face them. I had Ryan, and I had Grandma. I was ready for whatever life had in store for us. In the weeks following our wedding, Ryan and I were on cloud nine. We had moved into a small rented apartment and were slowly settling into our new life together. Our days were filled with love and laughter, and our nights with dreams of a future we were eager to build together. One of our major goals was to save for a down payment on a house. We had a plan, a budget, and a piggy bank that we lovingly called our future home. Every penny we saved was a step closer to our dream. But our financial plan had a significant dent, the $1,000 we sent to Ryan's mom every month. Ryan's mom was a constant presence in our lives, and not always a welcome one. She had a knack for showing up unannounced, often with a list of complaints and demands. Her favorite topic was her financial struggles and how we needed to help her more. One evening, she arrived at our apartment with a stack of papers. "Ryan, dear," she began, her voice dripping with sweetness, "we need to discuss something." Ryan, ever the obedient son, sat down with her, a look of concern on his face. "What is it, Mom?" he asked. She slid a paper across the table to him. "I need you to sign this," she said. It was a contract, a formal agreement that we, all the time we're married, would continue to send her $1,000 every month. But that wasn't all. She also wanted us to cover her utility bills, and part of other costs. Ryan was taken aback. "Mom, we're already helping you out every month. We can't afford all this," he protested. She simply shrugged. "You'll find a way," she said, her voice cold and unfeeling. I was speechless. The audacity of her demand was shocking. But before I could react, Ryan had already signed the contract. He looked at me apologetically. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said. "I didn't see this coming." I was seething with anger, not at Ryan, but at his mother. She was exploiting us, and it wasn't fair. "This isn't right," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You can't just demand money from us like this." She simply smirked. "I just did." The drive home was a silent one. I was too angry, and Ryan was too guilty. Our dream of owning a home seemed to be slipping away, replaced by a growing pile of bills and obligations. Life was a non-stop roller coaster ride with Ryan and his mother. No matter what we did, it felt like we were always under her microscope, and every move we made was met with her disapproval. It was suffocating, and it was starting to eat away at our happiness. The situation reached boiling point one evening when she came over for her usual uninvited visit. Ryan and I had been discussing the possibility of starting a family. We were excited about the idea of bringing a new life into this world. But when I shared our plans with his mother, her reaction was far from supportive. "A baby? Are you two nuts?" Margaret bellowed, her face turning an alarming shade of red. "You can barely keep your heads above water, and now you want to add a baby to this circus?" I was taken aback by her outburst. "We've thought about this, and we believe we're ready," I countered, trying to keep my voice calm. She snorted. "Ready? You think you're ready? You can't even handle your own lives, and now you want to toss a baby into the mix?" I turned to Ryan, hoping he would step in, but he just sat there, his face ashen. His mother's words had struck a nerve, and he seemed lost for words. "Instead of thinking about a baby, you should be thinking about me," she continued, her voice rising with each word. "I'm not getting any younger. I need you to take care of me, not some snot-nosed brat." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. "We're not your babysitters," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "We have our own lives to live. And we won't let you dictate them." Margaret turned to Ryan, tears welling up in her eyes. "Is this how you treat your mother? Is this how you repay me for all I've done for you?" Ryan looked at me, then at his mother. I could see the turmoil in his eyes. He was caught between his loyalty to his mother and his love for me. Finally, he spoke up. "Mom's right, Sarah," he said, his voice wavering. "We're not ready for a baby. We have too many responsibilities already." His words were like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I turned to him, my eyes filled with disbelief. "So, you're taking her side now?" He didn't answer, just looked down at his hands. That was all the answer I needed. I got up and stormed out of the room, leaving Ryan and his mother alone. That night, Ryan and I had the biggest argument we've ever had. We yelled, we cried, we said things we didn't mean. But in the end, nothing was resolved. He still sided with his mother, and I was left feeling betrayed and alone. The following weeks were a nightmare. Ryan's mother was more intrusive than ever, and Ryan was more distant. As a result, I just stopped communicating with Margaret, even if it was rude, but not seeing her was already a great achievement. She called me an impudent girl and stopped calling me too. I'd been noticing a change in Ryan for a while. He was always on his phone, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he sent text after text. He was coming home late from work, his excuse always the same, "Just got caught up at the office, babe." I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. I tried to convince myself that it was just work stress, that he was just busy. But deep down, I knew something was off. My suspicions were confirmed when my best friend, Lisa, called me one evening. "Sarah, I don't know how to say this," she began, her voice shaking. "I found Ryan's profile on that dating site we used to use." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What? That's impossible," I stammered, my mind racing. "He wouldn't." I'm sorry, Sarah, Lisa said, her voice filled with sympathy. I thought you should know. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there. When Ryan came home that night, I confronted him. Who is she, Ryan? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. Who are you texting all the time? Who are you meeting on that dating site? Ryan looked at me, his face pale. I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah, he stammered, his eyes darting around the room. Don't lie to me, Ryan. I yelled, my patience wearing thin. I know about the dating site. I know you're seeing someone else. Ryan didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at me. Then, he let out a sigh. I'm sorry, Sarah, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want you to find out this way. I felt a surge of anger. So, you admit it? You've been cheating on me? Ryan nodded, his eyes filled with guilt. I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just did. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The man I loved, the man I had planned to start a family with, was cheating on me. And to make matters worse, he wasn't even sorry about it. I want a divorce, Ryan, I said, my voice steady. I can't be with someone I can't trust. Ryan didn't argue, didn't try to convince me to stay. He just nodded, his face a mask of guilt and regret. 6 months had passed since my divorce from Ryan, and life was starting to settle into a new rhythm. I was learning to live alone, to be independent. Then, my grandmother passed away. She'd been a rock in my life, a woman of strength and wisdom. Her passing left me with a gaping hole, but also, unexpectedly, a considerable inheritance. She'd left me her old mansion, a beautiful house with vast gardens and rooms filled with antique furniture. And there was also a hefty sum of money, enough to let me live comfortably for the rest of my life. I was shocked, overwhelmed, but also grateful. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my life. Just as I was starting to adjust to this new reality, there was a knock on the door. Standing on my doorstep was none other than Ryan's mother, a woman who'd always been a thorn in my side. Well, look at you, living in luxury, she sneered, looking around the mansion with greedy eyes. I heard about your little windfall. You must be over the moon. I crossed my arms, raising an eyebrow at her. What do you want, Margaret? She put on a saccharine smile, her eyes still scanning the house. Well, dear, I thought it's only fair that since you and my son are married, I should get a share of this fortune. I couldn't help but laugh. Margaret, you're out of the loop. Ryan and I divorced 6 months ago. Her eyes widened, and she sputtered. What? No, that can't be right. Ryan would have told me. Call him and ask, I suggested, leaning against the doorframe. He'll confirm it. She pulled out her phone, dialed Ryan's number, and put it on speaker. Ryan, tell me it's not true, she demanded when he answered. Tell me you and Sarah are still married. There was a pause, and then Ryan's voice came through, sounding resigned. No, Mom, we're not. We divorced 6 months ago. Ryan's mom ended the call, her face pale. You've made a fool of me, she said, her voice trembling. And you, Ryan, you're an idiot for letting this gold mine slip through your fingers. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed off, leaving me standing in the doorway, shaking with laughter. It felt good to finally stand up to Margaret, to see her taken down a peg. I'd been through a lot, but I was coming out the other side stronger, more confident. My new life was just beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. I had a beautiful house, financial security, and most importantly, I was free from the shackles of an unhappy marriage. As I closed the door, I couldn't help but smile. Life was looking up. The sun had already started to set when I heard the knock. I opened the door to find my ex-husband, Ryan, standing there. His sudden appearance was as surprising as it was unwelcome. "What the hell are you doing here, Ryan?" I asked, my voice laced with annoyance. I heard about your inheritance, Sarah," he stammered, his eyes darting around the grand entrance of the mansion. "Is it true?" I crossed my arms over my chest, raising an eyebrow at him. "Yeah, it's true. My grandmother left me her house and a substantial amount of money. What's it to you?" Ryan swallowed hard, his gaze never leaving mine. "I was thinking, maybe we could give it another shot, Sarah," he said, his voice shaky. "I've been a fool. I let my mother dictate our lives. I didn't stand up for you when I should have. I want to make it right." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Oh, now you want to make it right?" I asked, shaking my head in disbelief. "Now that I'm rich, you suddenly want to be a better man? You think I can't see right through you, Ryan?" Ryan looked taken aback by my words, but he quickly composed himself. "It's not like that, Sarah," he said, his voice filled with desperation. I've changed. I can be a better man. I can make it up to you." I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see the greed in his eyes, the dollar signs practically flashing in his pupils. He was no different from his arrogant mother. He was just after my money. "Listen here, Ryan," I said, my voice cold as ice. "You had your chance. You blew it. Now, you want to waltz back into my life because I've come into some money? You're even more pathetic than I thought." Ryan flinched at my words, but he didn't back down. I just want to make it right, Sarah," he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. I just want another chance." I shook my head, a humorless smile on my face. "You're not getting another chance, Ryan," I said, my voice steady. "You're not getting a dime of my money. Now get off my property before I call the cops." With that, I slammed the door in his face, leaving him standing on the doorstep. I could hear him calling out to me, begging for forgiveness, but I ignored him. I had better things to do than listen to his empty promises and pleas. I walked away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I'd finally stood up to Ryan, to his manipulations and his lies. I'd finally stood up for myself. In the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking about Ryan less and less. I was moving on, slowly but surely. I was building a new life for myself, a life that was mine and mine alone. I made new friends, people who liked me for who I was, not for my money or my mansion. I started volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding joy in helping those who couldn't help themselves. I was finally living my life on my own terms, and it felt amazing.